My name is Priya Nair. I am 34 years old. And on a Thursday evening in late November, at a table set with my mother's best china and a centerpiece of orange and gold chrysanthemums, my brother Rohan stood up from his chair, raised his wine glass, and called my life's work a hobby. The dining room of my parents' home in Naperville, Illinois holds 12 people comfortably. That evening there were 11 of us, and every single one of them heard what he said. Rohan had just finished a second glass of Merlot, the one Dad always uncorked for Thanksgiving, and he was in that particular mood he gets after a second glass. Loose, performative, convinced the room belongs to him. He'd been doing impressions of his colleagues all through dinner, and we were all laughing, and it felt, for a moment, like a normal family. Like maybe this year would be different. And then my cousin Mina made the mistake of asking me how my company was doing. I had barely opened my mouth when Rohan set his glass down and leaned back in his chair with the specific posture of a man about to deliver a verdict. He looked at me the way you'd look at a child who'd spent the afternoon building a fort out of couch cushions and wanted credit for architecture. Company. He made the word sound like a gentle joke. Priya, you've been calling it a company for what, 2 years now? 3? He turned to my uncle Suresh, who was sitting to his right. She runs an app. Like a little tech startup thing. No investors, no revenue model, just she built an app. He smiled. He looked back at me. Babe, every 22-year-old in a WeWork is running a startup. That doesn't make it a company. The table went quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then my mother laughed, politely, the way she does when she doesn't know what else to do. My father looked at his plate. My cousin Mina said, "Oh, I'm sure it's great, Priya," in a voice that did not sound sure at all. I looked at Rohan. He was still smiling. He picked up his wine glass. I said, "You're right, pass the cranberry sauce." What he didn't know was that 6 days earlier, I had received a phone call from the editorial team at Forbes Magazine. What he didn't know was that my name, my face, and the story of my company, the company he had just called a little app, were 11 days away from appearing on the cover of their December technology issue. What he didn't know was that I had known about it for a week and had told exactly no one at that table. I didn't cry that night. I didn't argue. I passed the cranberry sauce and asked my aunt about her garden renovation and listened to my nephew talk about his soccer tournament. I ate my mother's cure for dessert, and I helped clear the plates. But I counted every person at that table. There were 11 of us. And I knew that 11 was exactly the number of people who would remember what Rohan said, and exactly the number of people who would be there when he found out how wrong he was. This is that story. To understand what that Thanksgiving table meant, you have to understand the Nair family and what it means to be Priya in it. My parents, Rajesh and Usha Nair, came to the United States from Kerala in 1987 with 2 suitcases and a combined savings of $800. My father got an engineering job at a manufacturing firm in Naperville within 4 months of arriving. My mother started working as a bookkeeper for a small Indian grocery on Devon Avenue in Chicago. By the time Rohan was born in 1988, they had a rented apartment. By the time I arrived 3 years later in 1991, they had a house. By the time I was in high school, my father had been promoted twice, and my mother ran the accounts for 3 small businesses out of a home office she'd set up in our spare bedroom. They built everything from scratch. Every plate in that china cabinet, every rug, every piece of furniture, all of it arrived slowly, deliberately, the way immigrants build things when they know there is no safety net beneath them. My parents understood work the way musicians understand rhythm. It was not something separate from life. It was life itself, organized and carried forward, one careful step at a time. Rohan, my older brother by 3 years, was always the son they pointed toward. Not in a cruel way, not intentionally, but in the way families do things without saying them, where one child becomes the proof and another becomes the afterthought. Rohan was pre-med at the University of Illinois at 20. He was an orthopedic surgeon in Chicago's northwest suburbs by 32. He drove a Range Rover Sport in Santorini black, He lived in a 4-bedroom house in Hinsdale with his wife Divya and their 2 sons, who were enrolled in private school beginning at pre-kindergarten. My parents were proud of Rohan in the way that required no translation. Every conversation at every family gathering eventually circled back to something Rohan had done, somewhere Rohan had been, something Rohan had said that was brilliant or funny or exactly right. I am not bitter about this. I say it the way you describe the weather, as something that is simply true, something you grew up inside of without fully understanding its shape until you were standing outside of it. I, on the other hand, had taken what my father once called the scenic route. I studied computer science at Northwestern University, graduated in 2013 with honors that I don't think anyone in my immediate family fully registered. I worked for 3 years at a healthcare technology firm in Evanston, building patient-facing software for hospital systems. I was good at it. My performance reviews used words like exceptional and methodical. I was promoted once. I was quiet at meetings. I stayed late. I brought good ideas that my managers occasionally remembered to attribute to me and occasionally did not. In March of 2017, I was sitting in a meeting about a new patient data interface when I had the kind of idea that arrives fully formed, like a key that turns in a lock you didn't know you were carrying. I spent 6 months building a prototype on evenings and weekends, working at my kitchen table until midnight, then waking up at 5:30 to put in another 2 hours before my actual workday began. I showed the prototype to 2 colleagues I trusted completely. Both of them used a word I had not expected. They said it was beautiful. The idea was this: healthcare is full of people who understand medicine and people who understand technology, but very few people who understand both deeply enough to build software that feels human. I wanted to build a platform that translated complex health data, lab results, imaging findings, care plans, discharge summaries into clear, plain language that patients could actually understand and act on. Not a dumbed-down version of medical records. A beautifully designed, precisely calibrated translation layer that worked between the clinical world and the patient's lived experience. I called the company ClearPath Health. In January of 2018, I quit my job. I had $42,000 in savings and a business plan I had refined over 9 months. I had a developer I trusted and a first pilot client, a small oncology practice in Evanston whose office manager had told me, with tears in her eyes, that her patients came in understanding almost nothing about their own diagnoses and left even more confused. She said, "If you can fix that, you can have us." I did not tell my family in any detail what I was doing. I mentioned I was starting a company. I explained it once, briefly, at a Sunday dinner in February of 2018, and watched my father nod carefully and my mother ask if I had health insurance, and Rohan say, "Tech is a tough space. A lot of people try." He was not unkind when he said it, he was just certain. The way people are certain about things they haven't studied. Over the next 3 years, I became a ghost at family gatherings. Not absent, I showed up for Diwali, for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, for my nephew Arjun's birthday parties, for my parents' anniversary dinner. But I was present the way wallpaper is present, there but not seen, part of the background. Rohan would talk about a particularly complex knee replacement he performed. My parents would ask follow-up questions with genuine interest. Someone would turn to me and ask how the app was going, with the particular inflection people use for things they consider hobbies, like asking someone how their pottery class was going. I would say something like, "Really well, actually. We're in talks with 2 hospital systems." And the conversation would turn, gently but unmistakably, back to something else. Rohan's specific flavor of dismissal was never mean-spirited in tone. That's what made it so effective. He never told me I would fail. He never said my idea was stupid. He just consistently declined to take me seriously. He referred to ClearPath as the app in conversations I was part of. He once told my cousin Meena, at a family wedding I was standing 2 feet away from, "Priya's very passionate about her little tech thing. I worry about her savings, but I admire the ambition." He was the kind of person who delivered condescension wrapped in concern, so that if you ever called it out, you were the difficult one. The most specific example I have, the one I turned over in my mind the most, happened at my parents' kitchen table on a Sunday in February 2021. I had just closed a deal with Loyola University Medical Center, a contract worth $380,000 annually, our biggest client to date. I came to Sunday dinner carrying this information like a lantern. I waited for the right moment and I said, I have some news. ClearPath just signed with Loyola. It's our biggest contract yet. I said the number. $380,000 annual recurring. My father raised his eyebrows. My mother pressed her palms together and said, Priya, that's wonderful. Rohan put down his fork and looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as politely baffled. Wait, they're paying you? Like, the hospital itself paying you monthly? I said yes. He said, huh, okay. He picked up his fork. That's good. Hopefully it sticks. He then said something to Divya about whether they should repaint the guest room before his parents visited. The conversation moved on. My mother asked if anyone wanted more rice. I sat there with my lantern. I kept it lit. The second example happened in October 2022. ClearPath had been featured in a piece in Med City News, a trade publication for health technology professionals. Not mainstream press, but significant within our industry. My investor, a woman named Carol Hendricks, who had put in $500,000 in our first outside funding round, called me after the article went live and said, "This is a turning point. You're going to start getting inbound from the big systems now." She was right. Within 3 weeks, we had inquiry calls from Rush University and from a regional hospital network in Indiana. I shared the Med City News article in the family WhatsApp group. I said something like, "Big week for ClearPath. Got featured in a major healthcare TED publication." My mother responded with the clapping hands emoji and a red heart. My father sent a thumbs up. My cousin Meena said, "Yay Priya, so proud of you." Rohan responded 11 hours later with a single message, "Nice." Then a period. Nice. That was it. I am not someone who needs exclamation marks from my brother. But there is something about that period after the niece that I have never been able to let go of. It was so perfectly, precisely indifferent, like noticing weather. And then came Thanksgiving 2023. I know I've already told you about that evening, but I want to give you the full texture of what those 20 seconds felt like, because context matters. We had just finished the main course. My mother's turkey, which she makes with a cardamom and cumin rub because she has always done things her own way, was down to the bones. My father had told a story about construction on I-90. My nephew Arjun had asked to be excused to go watch his iPad and been told to wait. Cousin Meena asked how my company was doing, genuinely, warmly, the way she always does. And Rohan leaned back in that chair. She runs an app, like a little tech startup thing. No investors, no revenue model, just she built an app. He smiled at Uncle Suresh. He turned back to me. "Babe, every 22-year-old in a WeWork is running a startup. That doesn't make it a company." Let me give you the actual numbers as they stood on that Thanksgiving evening. ClearPath Health had 17 full-time employees. We had contracts with 9 hospital systems across Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Our annual recurring revenue was $4.3 million. We had raised in 2 rounds $1.8 million in outside investment from 4 separate investors. And exactly 6 days before that dinner, Sarah Weston, a senior editor at Forbes Magazine, had called me at 8:47 in the morning to tell me that ClearPath Health had been selected for their December technology issue and that I would be on the cover. No investors, no revenue model, just a little app. I looked at Rohan. I said, "You're right." Passed the cranberry sauce. And then I made a decision in a place so quiet inside myself that I didn't even fully register it as a decision at the time. I would not tell my family about the Forbes cover. Not that night. Not the week after. I would let the world do it instead. The following morning, Friday, November 24th, 2023, I drove back to my apartment in Lincoln Park, made a pot of coffee, and opened my laptop. I had 17 emails from the Forbes team, final approvals on photography, a request for last-minute quotes, a timeline for the print edition. The digital edition would go live on December 5th. The print magazine would ship to subscribers on December 12th and hit newsstands on December 14th. I noted the dates. I responded to Sarah Weston's emails professionally, warmly, without mentioning Thanksgiving, and then I made a list. The list had 3 items on it. First, notify my key employees before the story went live so they were prepared for inbound attention. Second, coordinate with my PR contact, a woman named Jess Kowalski, who worked with early-stage health tech companies, to prepare a media response plan for the week of publication. Third, tell absolutely no one in my family. Not my parents, not my cousin Mina, who I trusted completely but who had never successfully kept a secret in a family group chat in her entire life. No one. The Forbes cover would be their introduction to the full truth of ClearPath Health. It would arrive the way the truth always arrives, when it's been patient enough, without announcement, without argument, without a single word of preparation from me. I built it in silence, which, at this point, was something I had practice with. The week after Thanksgiving, I had 2 back-to-back days of photography at the Forbes studio in Chicago. The photographer's name was Damian Cole, and he'd shot 3 previous Forbes covers. He was methodical and unhurried. We started at 9 in the morning and finished at 20 minutes past 4 in the afternoon. He had me in 6 different configurations of light, 6 different framings, 6 different versions of what the cover could be. He showed me nothing on the camera display until the final hour, and then he turned the screen toward me and said, "This one." It was a close shot, slightly below eye level. My face turned a fraction to the left. I was wearing a deep navy blazer over a cream blouse. My hair was down, which I almost never wore it. I looked, I thought, like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally set it down. In the 2 weeks between that shoot and the magazine's release, I did what I had always done. I went to work. I ran ClearPath's weekly all-hands meeting on Monday morning. I reviewed contracts on Tuesday. I had a strategy call with Carol Hendricks on Wednesday afternoon in which we discussed Series A timing, and she said, with her characteristic directness, "Stop thinking about the Series A. Think about the story you want to tell about where this company is going. The money will follow the story." She was right. She's almost always right. I sat with that conversation for several days. Thursday of that same week, I drove to the Loyola University Medical Center office to meet with their patient experience coordinator, a woman named Rosa Delgado, who had been ClearPath's day-to-day champion inside that institution since we first signed with them. Rosa had a habit of sending me screenshots of patient feedback at random hours, 7 in the morning, 10:45 at night, patients describing, in their own words, the moment they first understood their own diagnosis. One screenshot, which she'd sent me at 11 at night on a Tuesday in September, read, "For the first time since my diagnosis, I understood what my doctor was actually telling me." I read the ClearPath summary 3 times and cried. Good tears. Rosa said, "That's why we're here." I printed that one too. On December 2nd, 3 days before the digital edition went live, I met with my team. All 17 of them. We gathered in the main conference room of our River North office at 9:30 in the morning. I told them about the Forbes cover. There was a moment of silence that lasted about 4 seconds, and then the room erupted in a way that surprised me with its volume. Marcus Webb, my lead developer, stood up and started clapping, and within 3 seconds everyone in the room was standing. I sat at the head of the table and watched them and felt something I rarely allow myself to feel at work. Pure and uncomplicated gratitude. These were the people who had been in the building with me since before we had reliable heat in the winter, since before we had an espresso machine, since the days when our only conference room was a folding table in a shared co-working space in Wicker Park. They had believed in this before Forbes did. They had believed before almost anyone did. I told them what to expect. Increased inbound, potential media calls, clients reaching out for comment. I told them the company's position was simple. We were proud, we were grateful, and we were still focused on the work. I said, nothing about our mission changes because of a magazine cover. The problem we're solving is the same problem. Let's not get distracted from it. Marcus said, "Can we at least put the cover up somewhere?" I said yes. He grinned. "Good, because I already ordered a framed print." December 4th, 2023, the day before the digital edition went live, I called Carol Hendricks. She said, "Are you nervous?" I said yes. She said, "Don't be. It's already done. It's just the world finding out." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. I called Jess Kowalski next. Our media response plan was in place. 3 weeks of scheduled social posts, a press release for our existing hospital clients so they heard from us directly before seeing it in the news, and a templated response for any inbound media requests. Jess said, "You've earned this. Now let it happen." I made chamomile tea. I answered 12 emails. I went to bed at 11:17 and slept better than I expected. December 5th, 6:43 in the morning. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen in Lincoln Park when Sarah Weston sent me a text message. It said, "We're live. Congratulations, Priya." 2 minutes later, Jess texted, "It's up. And it's gorgeous." 1 minute after that, Marcus texted, Forbes.com, top of the page. They put you in the spotlight feature. Priya, it's the banner story. I put my coffee cup down. I pulled up Forbes.com on my laptop. And there, at the top of the homepage, was my face. The photograph Damien had taken in the clean white light of his Chicago studio. The headline read, "The Quiet Revolution: How Priya Nair Built a $4 million Health Tech Company by Solving the Problem Nobody Noticed." Underneath it, in smaller text, ClearPath Health founder on translating medicine into language that saves lives. I sat there for a long time. The morning light came through the east-facing window of my kitchen. I didn't cry. I just sat there with the image on my screen and felt something release in my chest that had been held very tightly for a very long time. My phone began to ring at 7:22. The first call was from Carol Hendricks. She said, "I knew it. I knew it the day you pitched me." I said to my husband that night, "This one is the real thing." At 8:15, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. It was the producer of a Chicago business news podcast with 30,000 monthly listeners who wanted to book me for the following week. At 9:03, I received an email from a hospital system in Minneapolis that I had been trying to reach for 8 months. The subject line was, "Following up, we'd love to reconnect." I had sent them exactly 4 emails over those 8 months, none of which had been returned. Now they were ready to reconnect. I noticed that. I noticed it without bitterness. Sometimes the world opens its door only after someone else has pointed at it and said, "There, that one." If you're still watching, I want you to pause with me here for just a moment, because I think you already know where this is going, and I want you to feel the full weight of it before we get there. If this story has touched something in you, if you've ever been the person at the table who was passed over, who was treated like a footnote in your own family story, drop a comment below and tell me. Tell me what name they used for the thing you were building. Tell me what word they used instead of company, instead of career, instead of future. I want to know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Hit the notification bell so you're here when the next story comes out. Because this community is built for exactly this, for the people who built something in silence and are still waiting for the world to catch up. Now let me tell you about the moment the world caught up. The Forbes print issue arrived in stores on December 14th, 2023. My parents are not people who buy Forbes Magazine. They are people who get the Chicago Tribune on Saturday mornings and keep a stack of Malayalam Christian devotional magazines on the coffee table in the living room. They were not going to accidentally encounter my cover, which was exactly why the family Christmas gathering, scheduled for December 16th, 2 days after the magazine hit stands, mattered as much as it did. Let me tell you about the living room of my parents' house in Naperville. The furniture is a particular shade of brown that was fashionable in 1998 and has since become timeless in the way that only happens when the people who own it stop noticing it. Decades ago, there is a built-in bookshelf along the south wall that holds a mix of engineering textbooks, Malayalam Bibles, 2 volumes of a Hindi encyclopedia my father bought at a garage sale, and a framed photograph of every family milestone going back to 1989. There is a Christmas tree that my mother decorates with a mix of glass ornaments she brought from India and tinsel she buys at Walgreens every year. There is a coffee table with a glass top, and that glass top is where my father occasionally places magazines. On the morning of December 16th, before anyone arrived, I drove to a Barnes & Noble on Route 59, and I bought 3 copies of the Forbes December issue. I put 2 of them in the trunk of my car. I brought the 3rd one into my parents' house. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was watching cricket highlights in the bedroom. I walked into the living room. The coffee table was clear. I set the Forbes magazine down in the center of the glass top, face up, my photograph visible, and I arranged it the way my father always arranged magazines, spine to the left, cover facing the room. Then I walked into the kitchen and helped my mother roll the dough for the snacks she was preparing. I did not say a word about what was on the coffee table. I talked about the drive. I asked her how Rohan's boys had been. I offered to chop the onions. I want to be exact about who arrived and in what order because the sequence matters. My cousin Meena arrived first, at 2:47 in the afternoon, with her husband Vikram and their 3-year-old daughter, Sonia. Meena walked into the living room, set her coat on the armchair, turned to put her bag down, and then froze. She looked at the coffee table. She looked at me in the kitchen doorway. Her mouth opened. I put one finger to my lips. Her eyes filled immediately. She pressed her hand to her mouth and nodded. She sat down on the couch directly across from the magazine and held her daughter in her lap and did not say a single word about it. My uncles Suresh and Aunt Parvati arrived at 3:15 with their son Dev, who was home from his 2nd year at Purdue. Dev walked into the living room, looked at the table, said, "Holy, is that you?" loud enough that my aunt came over and looked. And then my uncle Suresh stood there staring at the cover for a full 7 seconds before saying, "Priya." Just my name, like he was identifying something he hadn't expected to find. My father walked out of the bedroom at 3:22 to greet them and saw his brother Suresh standing in the living room holding the Forbes magazine. My father's face did something I have never seen it do before. It went completely still. Then it moved through several expressions very quickly: surprise, confusion, recognition, and something else I didn't have a word for until later. Later, I would understand it was pride of the kind that arrives late and therefore lands harder. The kind that carries within it the full weight of what it means to be a father watching a daughter you underestimated, quietly, privately, without ever saying it out loud, watching her prove you wrong. He held the magazine and read the headline. He read it again. He turned to me. His voice, when he finally found it, was quiet. "Priya, when?" I said. "The story went live December 5th. The print issue came out 2 days ago." He looked at the magazine. He looked at me. He said, $4 million. Not a question. A statement. Like he was making sure the number was real. 4.3, I said, annual recurring. My mother had appeared in the kitchen doorway behind me. She made a sound I have never heard from her before or since. Not quite a cry, not quite a laugh. Something between the two, from somewhere older than either. Rohan arrived at 4:08. I know the exact time because Meena, who had been watching the driveway from the front window with an expression of barely contained electricity for the preceding 45 minutes, texted me from across the room, "They're here. Oh my God. They're here." His family came through the front door in the order they always do. Divya first, then Arjun, then his younger son Kabir, then Rohan, unwinding his scarf, asking if there was parking on the street. The Forbes magazine was in the center of the coffee table. My father was sitting in his armchair to the left of it. My uncle Suresh was on the couch to the right. My cousin Meena was standing near the bookshelf with her arms crossed and an expression of studied calm that was costing her visibly. My Aunt Parvati had gone to the kitchen but came back to the doorway when she heard the front door open. Vikram was refilling his tea. Dev was sitting on the floor near the window. Every single person in that room knew exactly what was on that table. Every single one of them had been watching the door. Rohan took off his coat. He handed it to Divya. He turned toward the living room. He took 3 steps in. He saw the magazine. He stopped. He looked at it for what felt like a long time, though it was probably 4 or 5 seconds. He leaned forward slightly, the way you do when you're not sure you're reading something correctly. He read the headline. He looked at the photograph. He looked up at me. I was standing in the kitchen doorway with a cup of tea. I didn't smile. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. The room was completely silent. 11 people, and no one made a sound. Divya was the first to speak. She said, "Oh my gosh, Priya, is that Forbes?" Her voice was genuine, warm, delighted. "That's the actual cover?" "December issue," I said. My father said from his armchair, $4.3 million annual. He said it to no one in particular. Or perhaps to the room. Or perhaps to the version of every conversation we'd ever had about my work that he hadn't known how to correct. Rohan picked up the magazine. He held it in both hands. I watched him read the headline again. I watched him look at the photograph. His face was doing something careful and contained that I understood because I had done that same thing with my own face many times. He was working out what expression was appropriate. He was running the calculation of how this had happened without his knowledge. He was, I think, for the first time, understanding something about me that he had spent 3 years not looking closely enough to see. He put the magazine back on the coffee table. He looked at me. His voice, when it came, was slower than his usual register, quieter. He said, "Priya, I didn't know it was this big." I took a sip of my tea. "I know," I said. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried again. "The Forbes cover. That's not small." "No," I said. "It isn't." He looked at the magazine. He looked at me. My father was watching us. My uncle Suresh was watching us. The whole room was watching us, but quietly, and the way you watch something significant happen when you want to witness it without disturbing it, Rohan said. I said some things at Thanksgiving that weren't. I was being dismissive. He paused. "I'm sorry." And then, because he is Rohan and underneath everything he is also someone who was raised in the same house by these same 2 people and carries the same understanding of what matters even when he forgets to. "Act on it. I'm proud of you." He said it like it cost him something, which, I think, is how it should be said when you've waited too long to mean it. I nodded. "Thank you," I said. And that was enough. There is a version of this story where I played the moment bigger, where I had a prepared speech, where I made him account for every specific dismissal in a room full of witnesses. That version might have felt satisfying for a few minutes, but it would not have been true to what I actually wanted, which was not victory over Rohan. What I wanted was to be seen. And that had already happened, not because I'd orchestrated a dramatic reveal, because the work was real, because the company was real, and because eventually, real things become impossible to ignore. The days after the Forbes story went live were the kind of days I had been quietly working toward for 6 years, without letting myself fully imagine them. 3 major hospital networks reached out for preliminary conversations within the first week of publication. By December 21st, we had signed a letter of intent with Northwestern Memorial Hospital, our largest client to date, for a contract valued at $940,000, the terms of which were finalized in January of the following year. Carol Hendricks forwarded me an email from a venture capital contact who had read the Forbes piece and wanted to discuss Series A funding. By the end of December, ClearPath had been mentioned in 4 additional trade publications and 1 mainstream business outlet. My inbox looked like nothing I had ever seen before. Many of the messages were from strangers, healthcare professionals, patients, medical students, people who had experienced exactly the confusion my product was designed to solve and who wanted to tell me so. A woman named Teresa, who worked as a patient advocate at a community hospital in Rockford, wrote me 3 paragraphs about a patient she worked with who had spent 6 months misunderstanding his own diagnosis because the clinical language in his discharge summary was incomprehensible to him. She said she had showed him the Forbes article and he had cried. She said, "Thank you for caring about the part that nobody else cared about." I printed that email. It is in the top drawer of my desk. My mother called me on the evening of December 16th, after everyone had gone home, at 20 minutes past 11. She called from the kitchen landline, which she only uses for important things. She said in Malayalam, which she switches to when she wants to say something without any distortion. I knew. I always knew, but I didn't say it enough. I said, "You said it enough, Amma." She said, "No, mothers should say it more." We sat on the line together for a while without talking. Then she said, "Come for dinner Sunday. I'll make the fish curry you like." I said I'd be there. Rohan called me on December 18th. He asked if I had time to talk. I said yes. He said some things that I don't think are mine to repeat in their entirety here, because they were said in private and they were genuine, and privacy is one of the only dignities we can offer people who are trying to correct themselves. But the part I will tell you is this. He said, "I think I've been looking at you the same way since we were kids. I never updated the picture." I said, "I know." He said, "I'd like to." I said, "I know that too." We talked for 41 minutes. When we hung up, I sat in my car in the parking garage below my building and let myself feel the full weight of the past 6 years. Not with bitterness, not with triumph, just with a particular exhaustion and relief of someone who has carried something very heavy across a very long distance and has finally set it down. There is something worth saying about the specific kind of dismissal that happens inside families. It is rarely about you. It is almost always about the image someone built of you a long time ago, before you became whoever you are now, before you went out and built a thing in the world. They carry that original image like a photograph that hasn't been updated, and they keep holding it up to your face and insisting on the match. The gap between the photograph and the person standing in front of them is not cruelty, it is a failure of attention. And the only remedy for a failure of attention is undeniable evidence. I did not build ClearPath Health to prove Rohan wrong. I built it because I saw a problem that mattered and I believed I could solve it. But I am also honest enough to admit that there were days, specific difficult days in 2019, when a hospital network canceled our pilot program, and in 2021, when we almost ran out of runway, and I had to call Carol Hendricks on a Thursday evening and explain very carefully why I needed another 6 months. Days when something in me looked back at Thanksgiving tables and Sunday dinners and a period after the word nice, and used those memories the way you use a low-burning fire when the weather is cold. Not to live inside, just to stay warm enough to keep going. That was the moment I stopped being the afterthought and started becoming the proof. If you are someone who is building something in silence right now, if you have a company or a project or a life that the people closest to you have not yet learned to take seriously, I want to say this to you directly. You do not need them to believe in you before you begin. You need yourself. And you need the 1 or 2 people in the world who see what you see, who understand what you are trying to do and can say honestly, yes, that is real. Find those people and hold on to them. Carol Hendricks was that person for me. Rosa Delgado was that person. Marcus Webb was that person. None of them shared my last name. All of them showed up at exactly the right moment. Build the thing anyway. Not for the moment when someone at a Thanksgiving table finally goes quiet. For the thing itself. For the work itself. For the version of yourself that exists on the other side of finishing it. Because here is what I know now that I did not fully know 6 years ago. The work will outlast the doubt. Every time. The work is patient in a way that the doubt is not. The doubt gets tired. The work just keeps being real. The Forbes cover is framed now. It hangs in the ClearPath Health office in the River North neighborhood of Chicago, on the wall outside the main conference room, across from a whiteboard that currently has the architecture of our next product feature sketched out in blue dry erase marker. Every person who walks into that office for a meeting walks past it. My employees see it every day. New clients see it when they come in for their first visit. I see it when I walk past on my way to get coffee in the morning, and I still feel it. Not the pride exactly, but the reminder. The reminder that what I was building was always real. It was real before the cover. It was real before Carol Hendricks. It was real before Loyola and Northwestern and every contract and every trade publication. It was real on the day Rohan called it a little app, and it would have been real if the Forbes cover had never happened. The truth does not require an audience, but it helps when one shows up. My name is Priya Nair. I am 34 years old, and I am the founder of a company. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If you have ever been the person in your family who was called the scenic route, the hobby, the little app, if someone you love has ever held up an old photograph of you and insisted it was still accurate, what did you do with that? Did you argue? Did you go silent? Did you build something in the dark and wait? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And this community is made of people who understand exactly what it means to know something true about yourself before anyone else is ready to believe it. That is a particular kind of strength. I hope you feel it today. There are 11 people in my parents' dining room every Thanksgiving. This year, the conversation started differently. My cousin Mina said, "So, Priya, what's next for ClearPath?" And the whole table turned, all 11 of them, toward me. It was the first time that had ever happened. I looked around the table. I looked at Rohan. He was listening, really listening. I took a sip of water, I set the glass down, and I told them, "Thank you for spending this time with this story. Honestly, it means more to us than we can say." The Revenge Chronicles community is made of people who understand that the quietest comebacks are also the most lasting, and the fact that you stayed through every moment of this one tells us you are exactly who we make these stories for. We pour everything into getting this right. The pacing, the truth, the feeling of standing at a table where no one sees you yet but you know exactly what you're carrying. If this story reached you today, please share it with someone who needs it. A friend who is quietly building something. A sister who has been dismissed one too many times. A woman who is still waiting for the room to turn toward her. She is out there. She needs to know she is not alone. We are a team of 3, and we put every story out into the world with care. Subscribe if you haven't, and turn on your notifications so you are here for the next one. Every comeback starts in silence. We will keep telling the stories until every woman who has earned hers finally gets to hear it told.